From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hoda Labrador.
Hey, Hilda here. Running, tennis shoes, cold plunges, and diet. What have we misunderstood when it comes to cultivating well-being? What have we missed? And what needs to be reconsidered? This is episode 527, and our guest today is Mark Sisson. Mark is a pioneer in the ancestral health movement, probably best known for his blog, Mark's Daily Apple, and the Primal Health Coach Institute. He also recently wrote the book entitled Born to Walk, highlighting the transformative power of this simple practice for health and longevity. Today, Mark does some myth-busting when it comes to apply in our lives for a healthier lifestyle. Mark has shifted and now recommends walking instead of running, for example. He suggests we use minimalist shoes or go barefoot more often over tennis shoes. And he's not into cold plunging every day, even though this is trending. He also reviews with us how to make the most of walking. Is it better, for example, to take one long walk in the morning or to take frequent walking breaks throughout the day? He also talks about plantar fasciitis and how orthotics are not the solution for that. He also goes over his own dietary shifts and why he started his Paluva barefoot shoe brand. Before we get into the conversation, I want to tell you about a wonderful resource we have at the Weston A. Price Foundation. It is called Nourishing Our Children. Are you a parent, a would-be parent, a grandparent, or an adult interested in children's health? Nourishing Our Children is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation, established in 2005. It has a focus on timeless principles for supporting learning, behavior, and health through optimal nutrition. Nourishing Our Children has an active closed group on Facebook that offers support on how to nourish and not merely feed your children. If you join, you'll also have complimentary access to the group focused on adults for a simple donation of $5 for the calendar year. The moderators ensure that no question goes unanswered. So go to nourishingourchildren.org/groups to find out more. Again, that is nourishingourchildren.org/groups for more information and to join. In case you're wondering what it's about, here is a testimonial from Catherine Jimenez. I am a first-time mom of a soon-to-be 9-month-old and a member of the Nourishing Our Children's private Facebook group. I began this journey with the Nourishing Traditions book of baby and child care, but I felt I needed encouragement and support implementing some of the recommended food practices. Joining the group became instrumental in helping me navigate the barriers that I had into giving my baby his nourishing foods. I've had so many questions and have been so grateful for the clarifications and answers. My questions are always answered, and I'd say rather promptly as well. Thank you, Nourishing Our Children. Again, if you'd like to find out more about this group, go to nourishingourchildren.org/groups. This is Hoda Labrador, and you are listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Hilda. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you, too. Now, when I ran into you last, you told me you had just had hip replacement surgery. What's the deal? That surprised me.
Well, look, I was a runner back in the 70s, late 60s, actually, early 70s, throughout the 80s. Put in a lot of miles on these hips, probably inappropriately, which is something that informed my books later on. But, you know, I just turned 71 last year, and my hip started to really bother me, and I had a limp, a noticeable limp as a result of some deterioration in the joint. So I had a hip replacement. Now, that's nothing novel. A lot of people do that. But in my case, I was so prepared. I did what we call prehab. I really went into this operation with the intent of recovering as fast as I possibly could. So I strengthened my hip muscles. I did some inner outer thigh work on machines. I did some whatever I could on the elliptical trainer just to keep my the rotation of my hips going as much as I could without any sort of pain. So I had the operation December 3rd. I walked a little bit that afternoon. I walked a mile the next day. I walked 2 miles the next day. I mean, I really came back quickly. And of note, my surgeon said, don't do rehab. Don't go to physical therapy. Just walk. And so I took his advice and I just walked. And that was really the one of the keys to my recovery was the pre-recovery, the stuff I did before the surgery. So I had good muscle tone, the walking, and then the walking either barefoot or in special shoes that I make, these Palooza shoes that are 5-toed shoes, where I could feel the ground underneath me and I could reacquire a balanced, measured gait very quickly without having to wear thick, orthopedic tight shoes or things like that. So
Yes.
I was 90% recovered within 4.5, 5 weeks. And it's been a couple of months now. I'm 100% recovered now. I'm doing sprints and, chasing after Frisbees and doing all that good stuff.
Which I know you love Ultimate Frisbee. But let's back up a bit. You said that you think all that running did you harm. How so?
Well, look, humans are not born to run long distances metronomically every day, day in and day out. I mean, this was a real misunderstanding that came about as a result of the anthropology and some of the science. There was a book written years ago by a friend of mine, Christopher McDougall, who wrote a book called Born to Run.
I read that book. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's a great book, and he's a great storyteller. And he talks about, persistence hunters and chasing after the antelope or the gazelle on the plains of Africa, chasing them down for 2 hours and then jabbing a spear in them. But that persistence hunting wasn't 7-minute miles, 8-minute miles out racing the beast in a straight line. It was tracking and stopping and jogging and crouching and sprinting and a lot of different modalities to finally tire the animal out. And as a result of humans having evolved a cooling system, this ability to sweat, having evolved a longer big toe, which allows us to cover ground more easily than our ape cousins, having evolved a longer Achilles tendon, same thing to allow us to bound and spring forward better. All these things together gave us the ability to run once in a while, but mostly we are born to walk. And that's the thesis of my book, Born to Walk, which is we are all born to walk a lot, as much as we can, and we're born to sprint once in a while. Not every day, not even twice, 3 times. Once a week or so, we're born to sprint because that's the ancestral pattern. And here we are in wise traditions. That was one of the traditions of our ancestors. So it was antithetical for our ancestors to take a day and go, well, we don't have a hunt until Sunday, so let's go for an easy 6-mile run. No, that was completely antithetical to their health. So we're born to walk. We're born to sprint a little bit.
Yeah.
We're born to lift heavy things. And once in a while, we're able to run, which is a good thing.
So help me understand, where did this idea come from that we should be running for health maintenance or optimal performance?
It's a really unique set of variables, a perfect storm of misinformation and bad science, I think, that started in the late 60s and early 70s. There was, Ken Cooper, a great man, a great doctor, wrote a book in 68 called Aerobics. And in it, he made this supposition that the more hard work you did that raised your heart rate, that would strengthen the heart, and then that would confer longevity upon you. So he was looking at a nation that hadn't been doing much work, hadn't been exercising much for the prior couple of decades, and said, well, maybe if we all got out and jogged a little bit and ran and worked our heart muscle, we would live longer, which was an interesting premise. But he actually recanted much of that a decade later when he said, maybe not so much. Maybe I said it was too much, and maybe running wasn't the best choice. Meanwhile, Bill Bowerman and Phil Knight, the founders of Nike, in the early 70s, were perplexed at the fact that they had these great, naturally gifted, genetically gifted runners, the Oregon Track Club, who were setting world records and competing on the international scene, but their feet were hurting because the shoes that they had available to them were minimalist shoes. They were thin shoes, and the team wanted to be able to run 80, 90, 100 miles a week, but they couldn't because of the footwear. So Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman invented these thick, cushioned running shoes that enabled these well-adapted runners with great form to go out and run 80, 90, 100. I ran 120 miles some weeks and not have the impact and the trauma from that. Now, where it gets dicey is where Jim Fixx comes in and writes a book, The Book of Running. And he, again, says running is the best thing you could do. It's the best form of exercise. And so now we have this, okay, Cooper's book on aerobics. We have these thick cushion running shoes, which enable people with bad running form to not get that immediate jolt of a heel strike. Like if you were to run barefoot down the sidewalk and you tried to heel strike, you tried to land on your heels, you'd give up after 3 steps. You'd say, no, this. But the new shoes forgave this sort of bad behavior. Well, now we have a generation of runners that start running because they think it's good for them. It's not. They assume that the more miles they do, the longer they'll live. Not necessarily true. They assume that it's a great way to lose weight. Running is a horrible way to lose weight. Most people who engage in a running program to lose weight wind up very disappointed because most of them run at a heart rate that is too high for them to be burning the fat that they want to melt off. And
The
at
heart
that
rate is too high.
yes, the heart rate is too high. So most people run at a heart rate, and again, they can do it because they're mostly burning sugar. They're burning the glucose in their bloodstream. They're burning the glycogen in their muscles. They're actually cannibalizing some of their muscle tissue. Running is catabolic. But they get back from the workout, and they're like, oh my God, that was so valuable. I struggled. I suffered. I sweated. Like I really worked out a lot. I'm overheated. I got to sit and rest for a while. I probably can't go out and rake the leaves, honey. You know, I can't. I'm sorry, Tommy. I can't throw the football with you because Daddy just went out and ran 7 miles real hard. But what happens is they don't burn the fat that they want to burn. They burn the glycogen. And the brain goes, hey, wait a minute. We can't do this. We can't do that. We have to eat to replenish the lost glycogen. And so there's an automatic system in the body that tends to have runners who don't know how to run well or haven't trained well to overeat. They overcompensate. And so over the years, you see people who've been running, religiously 35 miles a week, same 15 pounds to lose. They just don't lose the weight. But what they do is they shift their body composition and they start burning a little bit more muscle and putting on a little bit more fat. And usually it's visceral fat or it's fat around the midsection. And so you look at the start of any of these major marathons. There was, recently there was the Boston Marathon, which is you have to qualify to be in, but New York Marathon before that and LA Marathon. And most of the people running a marathon are overweight. Most of the people running a marathon are overweight. And if running were that efficient and effective at burning off body fat and having you trend toward your ideal body composition, everybody would look fit, but they don't. Running is a bad choice. So just to finish the thought about what happened to my hip. So I'm one of those people that put in a lot of miles because the shoes allowed me to put in more miles than I probably should have. And that was wear and tear on a joint that was not designed to be putting in 100 miles a week for 7, 8, or 9 years in a row. And then combine that with the fact that I had a very grain-based diet for much of my life. And it wasn't until I was in my late 40s that I realized that grains were causing a lot of my physical issues. So I had horrible issues from mostly from wheat, right, from gluten. But I had irritable bowel syndrome from the age of 14 until I was 47. I had arthritis in my feet. I had all sorts of, issues that also accompanied the overtraining that I did from running, but were also a factor of my diet. And so when I finally gave up grains, that transformed my life, Hilda. That was what that sent me on this path down the Primal Blueprint and writing about diet and writing about all of the ways in which we can enhance our health by getting our eating right and eating in a more natural way. So for me, I think it was the deterioration from the grain-based diet for 40 years, from the running. It just sort of, and I play ultimate frisbee. I do a lot of things that a 70-year-old guy probably shouldn't be doing, but so I had my hip replaced, and I'm very thankful that technology exists because I feel better now that hip feels better than it did, 5 or 10 years ago.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, it's so cool to hear your story. What I like about it, Mark, is that you're open. So you might have been like, I'm running. I'm always going to be a runner. You're a former triathlete. You might have been like, I'm not stopping, but you're open to learning. And that's what caused you to shift your diet and your athletic approach, right?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And it was, wasn't a light switch flipping. It was a gradual evolution. Took me a while to discover that it was the grains. It was like a big issue with my diet. The industrial seed oil thing came up later. The inflammation that may result in many of our bodies as a result of overconsumption of those types of oils. All these things they kind of evolve into a way of eating. So for me, I was an early paleo guy, and then I developed the Primal Blueprint, which was a little bit more forgiving than the paleo program was. Like I was more of more accepting of dairy, for instance, real dairy.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was keto. I was big on the keto bandwagon for a while, and then I realized, well, I can't live keto sustainably. So I started talking about metabolic flexibility and developing that with intermittent fasting. And then, now I would describe myself as sort of carnivore adjacent.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. But I want to ask you, how many people, Mark, are still running? Like, how big is the running craze now compared to, let's say, in the 70s when all these books were coming out?
It's huge. I mean, people still run a lot. There's still the marathons have more runners in them than ever before. A lot of people claim to run and want to run. Running shoe sales are through the roof, but the number of injuries has not decreased. 50% of all runners get injured every year. Like, that's a horrible statistic. 25% of all people who claim to be runners are injured at any one point in time. So right now, Hilda, 25% of all the runners in the U.S. are injured.
Oh my gosh. And this actually resonates with me. I am not a runner, but I have a friend whose husband is running all the time. And exactly what you described earlier, Mark, is how he lives. Like, he'll be like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. And he doesn't have energy for anything. I'm like, this is a guy that just ran who knows how far. And all he wants to do is slump in a chair.
What
and
is
he's
he
not.
doing it for? Why is he doing it?
I don't know. I think he's doing it because he wants to be ripped. He's like 50. He's like, I want to be ripped at 50 like Troy Casey. And, so it's like he thinks this is the solution. But
not only is it not the solution, but most people who are running that amount would be so much better served dialing their diet back a little bit. And, 80% of your body composition happens as a result of your food choices. If you get that right, if you get the metabolic flexibility part of it right, you don't even have to exercise that much to be ripped. But someone that old, I would say lift weights, man. Like, start lifting weights. And then instead of running, walk. Walking is the greatest it's a quintessential human exercise. It's something everybody can do. It is very valuable. A lot of runners say, walking, it's not valuable. I'm not burning enough calories. No, this is not about calories burned. It's about the movement. It's about keeping moving and mobility. And yeah, you're burning a little bit of fat, but it's all you're burning is fat. You're not cannibalizing muscle tissue. For instance, as I said, running is catabolic. Running tears muscle tissue down, which is why every elite runner you've ever seen has no meat on their bones, right? They got legs, but their upper body is skinny. So running is catabolic. Walking is anabolic. Walking actually helps build muscle. So there are all these great reasons for people who are not running for the purpose of competing. Like, some people could run. Like, I in the book, in Born to Walk, I say, the only people who should be running are runners. Now you go, well, that's pretty glib, Mark. But no, a runner is somebody who is genetically gifted, who is an ectomorph, naturally skinny, big lung capacity, pretty much a high genetically determined VO2 max, and a very high tolerance for discomfort or pain. Well, that's like 3% of the population. Everybody else should be walking a lot. And yes, sprinting once in a while. Play your games. I mean, go sprint, but not lacing up the shoes and putting in 45 minutes of struggling and suffering at a heart rate that is too high for you to be burning fat, but too low for you to be developing any sort of VO2 max or aerobic capacity or power or strength or speed. It's just practicing hurting every day. And why would you do that to yourself?
Right. No, absolutely. And to your point about walking, I've traveled the world and gotten to connect with indigenous cultures, and it's part and parcel of their daily life. And they're walking to go get water from the river, or they're walking to, like you said, to herd animals, not to hurt themselves, but to herd animals. So that we have to be intentional about it, though, because our lives are so sedentary. So if someone's listening right now and they're like, I'm inspired, I do want to walk, I've been poo-pooing it, but now it's my time to get in. How many minutes a day? What time of day? Do you have any guidelines for this sort of thing?
As much as you can fit it in. So the people will come to me and they'll say, geez, Mark, I would love to walk. I get what you're saying. I don't have 45 minutes to walk in one lump sum. And I would say, okay, do you have 10 minutes to walk the dog in the morning? Do you have 15 minutes to park further away from Whole Foods and then, go shopping and then whatever, come back? Can you drop the kids off a mile away from school and everybody walk to and from school? Do you have coworkers that you can have lunch with? And a lunch break is an hour. It only takes 20 minutes to eat lunch. So then spend 40 minutes walking with your friends. And by the way, the body loves the fact that you would walk after a meal. It aids in digestion. Can you walk in the evening with your spouse? I mean, and the point is, even 5 10-minute walks spread throughout the day might even be more valuable than one 50-minute walk.
Interesting.
Because the body wants to constantly be moving. We are born to walk. We're born to move. We're born to move a lot. We're bipedal. I mean, our body expects us to be moving in different ranges and planes of motion as much as possible throughout the day. We're not meant to sit at a desk. We're not meant to stand at a desk. We're meant to be moving. So the people who say, well, yeah, I got 50 minutes, Mark, or an hour. I put in an hour of walking. Check that off. I'm done. Now I'm going to sit at my desk the rest of the day. I don't have to walk. I can think about other things. Well, that's something, but I would say those 5 sections of 10 or 12-minute walks spread throughout the day might be a better choice for you.
And more attainable, like you said, for the person who's like, I'm so busy. They've got to take, as I call it, like a sun break. Why not take 10 minutes and get outside at one point? Or like you said, after a meal, walk your dog. Like that's much more doable for most people's schedules, I would imagine. But Mark, I want to go back to what you were saying about the shoes, because I've interviewed Stephen Sasson from Zero Shoes on this podcast about Minimalist and how important that is. Minimalist shoes, to be specific. How is our footwear affecting our ability to walk injury-free?
Yeah, it's a big problem. So when I say walk, I also, with an asterisk, say walk in minimalist shoes. So Stephen, who's a good friend of mine, makes a great shoe. Zero is a great shoe. Minimalist shoe is defined as wide, thin, flat, and flexible. Wide enough to accommodate a full splay outward of your toes. Thin enough that you can feel the ground you're walking on underneath. So you want to feel the sticks and stones and holes that you step in. The foot wants to feel that. It helps you to orchestrate the entire kinetic chain. Flat, which means zero drop from the heel to the toe. You want to emulate walking barefoot. And whenever you put on a modern shoe today that's got an expanded thick heel, you're raising the heel off the ground and automatically shortening the calf muscle, which then puts more tension on the Achilles, which then causes potential Achilles problems or plantar fasciitis. So wide, thin, flat, and flexible. Flexible, you want to be the shoe to be able to accommodate changes in terrain, tilt and texture of the terrain. Again, when you are barefoot, it's almost impossible to roll your ankle if you're walking slowly when you're barefoot, because by the time you weight that front foot, even if you're stepping on a rock sideways, by the time you weight the front foot, the brain has all the information it knows on exactly how much to scrunch the arch around that rock or roll it off, how much to bend the toes, how much to roll the ankle outward so the knee doesn't get tweaked, how deeply to bend the knee to offset some of the change in velocity, and how much to torque the hip or tilt the hip. All of this information is available because our feet have 10,000 nerve endings, 50,000 nerve endings on the bottoms of them that can detect everything about the ground that we're walking on. And by the time you weight that front foot, the brain knows exactly how to organize your posterior kinetic chain. So it's a really, so how modern footwear kind of negates all that is, first of all, they're stiff shoes. You can't feel the ground you're walking on, so they're not flexible, they're stiff. Typically they're cushioned. And when I say stiff and cushioning doesn't mean they're not, mutually exclusive. You can have a stiff shoe that's cushioned and you just sink into it like a Bosu ball. That cushion, and then they have arch supports like to a fault. So people who wear these shoes with lots of arch supports or with orthotics in them are unburdening their arch muscles of having to work it all. So now all the muscles in the feet atrophy. And when your foot muscles atrophy, that can cause problems later on if you're barefoot and you're walking through your house at night and you trip on something and now you lose your balance because you don't have the strength to be able to maintain, and all these things that can go wrong because of the footwear that we chose in the name of fashion or short-term comfort.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It just reminds me of all of our modern interventions, I often say we are sacrificing our health on the altar of convenience, right?
You just said something. I have to write it down, Hilda. Interventions. I'm going to change the word invention to intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Modern interventions. So there's no more room for modern inventions. Everything from here on is a modern intervention.
That's right. That's right. And I wanted to ask you about plantar fasciitis because I feel like every time I turn around, someone is struggling with foot issues, but they might also be unwittingly struggling with a hip issue or a shoulder issue that's connected to their footwear, right?
Many of these issues are connected to the feet, and that's probably what happened in the case of my hip. My hip dysfunction was a manifestation of the kinetic chain that started with bad shoes, and then I got arthritis in my knees, so I wore orthotics to prevent me from pronating, even though pronation is part of a running gait. So now that I wasn't pronating, the stress went further up the kinetic chain to my hips. It's incredible the damage we can do by putting a wedge here and a shim here and fixing stuff up, but never getting really to the root of the problem, the origin of the problem, which is we should be barefoot. And if not barefoot, we should be wearing minimalist shoes. And, as you mentioned, I have a minimalist footwear company. It's called Palooza. We do a 5-toed shoe. Now, this is a trail shoe, but you can see it's got 5 toes on it. And so every toe articulates individually. So when you're stepping on stones and rocks and you're on trails, rocky trails, you can feel the entire surface of the trail underneath you. And your brain knows exactly how to organize that kinetic chain so that you don't again, roll an ankle or tweak a knee or slide off sideways and break something.
Coming up, Mark addresses how to transition to minimalist shoes to avoid injury. He also addresses what causes plantar fasciitis and how to gradually realign and strengthen the muscles related to that issue without orthotics.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Optimal Carnivore. Organ meats are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. The founders of Optimal Carnivore understand the amazing benefits of eating organ meats, but they know they can be difficult to source, and the process of preparing them isn't always easy. So, Optimal Carnivore started sourcing 100% grass-fed organ meats from New Zealand, freeze-drying the organs, and encapsulating them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. They chose New Zealand because it is a pure source, a pristine land with rich soil, lush greenery, and one of the cleanest environments on Earth. The products are 100% grass-fed and grass-finished, and free of hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, and GMOs. And since our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal, Optimal Carnivore has created a unique blend of 9 different organs in their grass-fed organ complex. It is a powerful combination of beef liver, brain, thymus, heart, kidney, spleen, pancreas, lung, and gallbladder. It is a real nose-to-tail solution. Each organ contains its own unique benefits and nutritional profile and provides a large range of nutrients that support all of your major organs and glands. An Optimal Carnivore, as I said earlier, they gently freeze-dry the organs to preserve the vitamins, minerals, proteins, and enzymes. Basically, they have taken the guesswork and the hassle out of eating organ meat. And these supplements are perfect for people who are traveling or still trying to develop a taste and an appreciation for organ meats. Plus, Optimal Carnivore plants 1 tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. They currently have a grass-fed organ complex, as I mentioned, a grass-fed bone marrow product, and a grass-fed liver and brain-nourished product. Go to Amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and use the code Weston10 when you place your order to save 10% on all products. Again, that's Amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and the code Weston10 to save 10% on all products. And Hydro Health. Do you ever feel like you're doing all the right things for your health, but still not getting the results that you want? You hit the gym, you eat clean, but you're still tired, foggy, maybe dealing with gut issues or breakouts. Well, there is a high chance it could be due to a harmful free radical. Free radicals are everywhere. In our polluted air, in processed food, even in our self-care products. They quietly mess with your gut, brain, and metabolism, pretty much everything. So, how do you fight back? Well, that's where today's sponsor comes in. It is the Hydro Health bottle. This bottle turns regular water into hydrogen water. Hydrogen water is, in simple terms, water rich with molecular hydrogen. And molecular hydrogen is the smallest antioxidant in existence. Unlike other antioxidants, it can reach every part of the body, even your cells. The bottle is easy to use, and thousands are already feeling the difference. And right now, you can go to hydrohealth.co and get 10% off your order with the code WISE. Again, that's hydrohealth.co and the code word WISE for 10% off. Check it out. This is Hoda Labrador, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. But I have a question because I have friends that got excited and started kind of following my example of getting more minimalist shoes. And they were like, I can't walk in these because maybe, like you said, their physiology was compromised because they were so used to for so long wearing shoes with the supports and the high heels and so forth.
Look, one of the things that happened in the early days of minimalist footwear was that when this book Born to Run came out, in which he not only hypothesized that humans are born to run, but we're born to run barefoot or in minimalist shoes, like thousands of runners said, oh, I'm a runner. I run 50 miles a week. I'll get some of these minimalist shoes and I'll go out and run 7 miles the first day. And they got injured. And they got injured it's a perfect example of how, while they were still capable of running 40 or 50 miles a week, their feet were not strong. Their feet had been atrophied, and all of the pressure was then being put on the ankles and the calves and the knees and the hips. But because their feet had been encased in these tight, narrow toe boxes, and their arches had been supported with an arch support, a high arch support, and their heels had been offset with a cushion and then raised up. All of this had gone to creating a dysfunction that when you then start to go back to a more minimalist or barefoot lifestyle, you have to train yourself again. You have to work into it easily. So we tell people with my shoe, we say, don't run in these. By the way, they're the best running shoe you'll ever have if you know how to run, but don't run in these shoes, walk in them, because you can't hurt yourself walking, but only walk the first day, 10 or 15 minutes. You get used to the fact that your toes are splayed outwardly. Get used to the fact that if you have plantar fasciitis, understand that plantar fasciitis isn't even an itis. It's not as much an inflammation as it's an osis. It's plantar fasciosis. Now, an osis is the death of the tissue as a result of loss of blood flow. So when you take a foot, if that's the big toe, and then you cram it all together and you cram that big toe against the other ones, then you cut off the circulation on the art because of that. And now that plantar fascia region loses circulation and it dies. It stops functioning the way it's supposed to. And no amount of rolling with a lacrosse ball or stretching is going to fix it. You just have to open up the circulation again, which is best achieved by going barefoot or by putting in toe spacers or by wearing a shoe like we have, like Paluva, which automatically splays your toes outwardly. And as you walk, you're gently and passively massaging your feet, because we tell people to look for cobblestones and look for uneven surfaces to walk on. It just feels so good. And you're gradually you're relaxing, realigning, and strengthening the muscles of your feet.
Wow, this is so the opposite of how our feet often are. Like you said, they're crammed together, and especially with women, we're wearing our high heels and we don't realize the damage we're doing to our bodies. So,
the heels look great, Hilda. The heels look great. But there's a point at which, you have to realize you're sacrificing a lot of comfort for a little bit of fashion.
Yeah, that's right. And maybe causing some long-term issues. Well, now, speaking of the need to pay attention to our bodies, let's talk a little bit about rest and recovery. So you've already kind of dispelled some myths about activity and what can make us more fit and strong. Talk to us about the need for that, rest and recovery.
Well, the only reason that training works, the only reason that working out, lifting weights, running sprints, even running long distance for that matter, the only reason it works is because at the time we're doing it, we're doing damage. And then it the body responds by getting stronger as a result, by building back a little bit better. So if you only tear the body down and never get a chance to build back, you get burned out, you get injured, you get tired, you cease to improve performance. All of these things can happen because people are overtraining. So rest becomes a critical part, a critical component of the training matrix. Yes, train and train well and train smart and train hard when you need to train hard, but then apply an appropriate amount of rest and nutrition, right? The amount of nutrients, protein, carbohydrate, electrolytes, things like that, to be able to recover and repair so that theoretically the next time you go do this, you're a little bit stronger. You're a little bit more powerful. So rest it's always been there for us to acknowledge, but it's often overlooked because of the mentality of the last several decades, which is like no pain, no gain, and more is better. And if my competitors are putting in 15 miles a day, I got to put in 20 miles a day, and that's not how the body works.
Yeah, I have to confess, I shortchange myself on the rest thing sometimes. I've got one of these sleep trackers, and it used to always tell me, your restfulness is low. You might need to take it easy today. And I'm like, whatever. I would blow past it, thinking more is better, but that's not always the case.
It's almost always not the case. Yeah, more is better is once in a while, you can have a training cycles, right, where you really grind it out hard for a week or so. But then that same cycle, instead of going hard day, easy day, rest, hard day, easy day, rest, is now hard week and then an easy week, right? You have to match the cycle. So if you're having a really hard week, you would want to take a really easy week to recover from that. And as you get older, and I'm someone who has not lost my power and strength as much as most people my age. What I have lost is recovery. So what I used to be able to do in a day and then come back and do it again 2 days later, now it takes 4 days to be able to come back and do it again. So the recovery has to be built into, you just got to be mindful and cognizant of where you are on your journey so that when you do the work, you do it well, you do it mindfully, you do it smart, and then you allow for that appropriate amount of recovery.
But just to be clear, Mark, you're not saying that we need to necessarily recover from activities like walking. That's something we can include day to day, right?
Walking is not, when I'm talking about recovery, I'm talking about the hard days in the gym, right? The lifting days, the leg days, or a sprint day. Because I tell people, like, nothing is as effective for your overall fitness and your body composition as sprinting is. And then people go, okay, I'll sprint every day. No, you can't do that. You gotta, if you sprint right, if you sprint appropriately, you better not be able to do it again as hard 3 days later or 4 days later, maybe once a week. And then move on to something else, lift some weights in the gym and do that hard, but recover. And that's your upper body. But you're right. Walking is something I do on a recovery day. So if I don't even take a day off, if I take a day off from, training, walking is something I do as it's part of my recovery, because it's great example is bodybuilders go in the gym and they're lifting heavy stuff and like really getting to the essence of what their bodies are capable of doing and breaking, not quite breaking down. They would never get on a bike and go ride a bike hard. They would never get on a treadmill and run, but they will get on a treadmill and walk, because walking is part of their recovery from that hard workout they just did.
And side note that we don't talk about this much about on the podcast, but what do you think of cold plunging or getting in cold water to help aid recovery and performance?
So much has been said about cold plunging in the last several years.
Yeah.
And I'm not convinced. I mean, I started cold plunging 20 years ago in my backyard in Malibu. I had a pool that was unheated, and it would get down to low 40s, high 40s in the wintertime. And I would walk in calmly and hang out there for 2 or 3 minutes and then get out. But I was doing that because I was thinking to myself how much I hated cold water. I was trying to overcome my hatred of cold water. It wasn't about activating brown fat and burning fat. It wasn't about inflammation or anti-inflammatory effects. Now, cut to recent times, the last couple of years, and everybody's talking about the anti-inflammatory benefits of cold plunging. But even in the last year or two, new research has come out, which I've known about a long time, which is that if you are in the gym lifting weights hard on a day, like doing a leg day, the last thing you want to do is get in a cold plunge because you want the inflammation. That is part of the signal that you're giving your body as a result of the hard work you did, combined with the rest to build those stronger muscles. If you get in a cold plunge after a hard leg day, immediately after a hard leg day, you negate some of those benefits. Understand that a cold plunge is a awful insult to the body. Nobody loves a cold plunge. If anybody says they love a cold plunge, they're wrong. They're lying to you. They like having finished a cold plunge. They like getting out of the cold plunge. They like the feeling they get, the euphoria they get from not being in the cold plunge anymore after 2 minutes. But the cold plunge itself, the available benefits, I think, have been oversold to a lot of people. So it's a hormetic stress. So that and I always look at a cold plunge in the context of what does the rest of the day look like. Now, you're an NBA basketball player in the middle of a series, and you just had a hard game. Yes, get in the cold plunge right after the game. You want the anti-inflammatory benefits because you want to be able to do this tomorrow night and play another series. But if you're a bodybuilder and you get in the cold plunge, you're not going to do the leg day again tomorrow. You're going to want the benefits to accrue over time. You don't want the anti-inflammatory aspect. You want the inflammation to prompt the genetic signaling, the upregulation of the genes that build more muscle, and so on and so forth. So the context is huge. Some people say, well, then Mark, what if I work out hard in the morning and then I go to work all day and then I come home and I cold plunge at night before bedtime? Well, look at it in the context of the day. If you had a hard, stressful workout in the morning, you had a long, stressful day at work, and then you come home and have your body undergo another stress because, make no mistake, a cold plunge is a stress. You might be accumulating all of these stresses, which raises your cortisol and is counterproductive to your longevity goals, to your immediate health goals. So you always kind of have to look at the context in which you're choosing to do this type of activity. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. I'm really grateful that you brought this to the fore. We don't usually hear this perspective, I would say. And I'm one that has enjoyed cold plunges for the reason you stated, because it teaches me to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I like challenging myself, but I've got to do it in the right context. But speaking of mindset, let's talk a little bit about how mindfulness practices can help our physical fitness and our overall wellness.
Well, to me, it's pretty simple. And the term mindfulness practice or, mindset. Look, the first thing for me is I still treat myself like I'm a 32-year-old athlete.
I love it.
So, that's how I live my life. I don't live my life in sort of a protective cocoon about, well, I'm getting old and I have to start watching myself. Yeah, I manage risk, and that's part of the mindset. And the mindfulness is knowing where the limits are and not exceeding them. So as much as I like to treat myself as a younger version of myself, I also don't go to the gym and think I'm going to set a personal record on the bench press ever again.
Mm-hmm.
I have a talk that I give in which I talk about people doing their 1 rep maximums, the term 1 rep max.
Yeah.
Well, after the age of 35, a 1 rep max is sort of a binary proposition. Either you can do it, in which case it's probably not your max, or you can't do it and you might get hurt trying.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no benefit to doing this sort of self-test to determine a 1 rep max. Better that you pick a weight that you can do maybe 4 of, possibly 5 of, if that's like you're going for heavy. I pick weights that I can do 10 or 15 of. But if the heaviest you choose in the gym as an older person is something you can still do 4 or 5 of rather than barely do 1 or 2 of, you're probably going to reduce your risk of getting injured. As an athlete, as a person trying to navigate life and stay fit all the time, injury is the biggest problem. Injury is your body's way of saying you're doing something wrong, right? We should not get it. Do you think our ancestors got injured other than, in a battle or getting, eaten by an animal? No, they didn't get an overuse injury from, training too hard or whatever. They lived life. That was their training was life. And I guarantee you, if they got injured, they didn't last long. They didn't last long enough to pass the genes along to the next generation.
I love that. Their training is life. That's true. And in some of the cultures I visited, the older people are still in the mix of all the things, but they're not going as hard as the younger guys, right? They're not at the lead of the pack going after that jaguar. They're maybe doing some different things and still using their skills and their bodies, but as you say, weighing the risk, I think. Different expectations for them. Well, Mark, what do you say to the person who's like, oh, actually, Mark is getting older and he just wrote Born to Walk because he can't run anymore? What do you say to the haters?
I mean, haters going to hate, but I've developed such an appreciation for walking as a therapeutic tool. I do some of my greatest creativity, book writing and blog writing and whatever when I'm walking. I have meetings when I'm walking, so it's a form of what I would call productive leisure. It's a mindset. Speaking of mindfulness and mindsets, it's a mindset when I'm walking that every step I take, I know I can literally feel the ground underneath, and that reverts back to my shoes. The fact that I'm choosing to wear these shoes that connects me with the earth. I mean, look. Our feet are our connection with the universe. This is how we connect with the universe, through our feet. And I want to get close to that. I want to get as close to natural as I possibly can. So if I'm out walking 6 miles on concrete or pavement or cobblestones, I want the minimalist footwear, but I want my toes to be able to feel everything about the ground. I want that to inform my brain of how to orchestrate my kinetic chain. And in so doing, I feel a sense almost with every step I take that I'm getting stronger and stronger. I'm getting more resilient and more mobile. That never happened to me as a runner. As a runner, there was a lot of times where it was like, okay, I'm heading out the door now. I'm going pretty fast. Hope I don't get injured. Hope I don't tweak something. I feel, whatever. I mean, most of my career, I felt pretty strong, but there was always that potential for something bad to happen. Walking, it just doesn't happen. I mean, people don't get injured walking unless they're unconscious about what they're doing or unless they're wearing bad footwear, which again, we're going to come back to the combination of walking, but making sure with an asterisk, you're walking in minimalist footwear.
Right. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. So I'm eager to get my feet back on the ground right after our conversation here today. But I do want to pose to you the question I like to pose at the end of the show, Mark. If the listener could do only one thing to improve their health, one thing, what would you recommend that they do?
What do you think I'm going to say, Hilda?
I think you're going to say walk.
Walk, yes. Yes, indeed. How would I get away with not saying that? Right. So everybody here. So my book, Born to Walk, it's two things. I want to give runners permission to walk again, because most runners think, it's not valuable. So I'm giving runners permission to walk again. And I'm giving people who've never walked because they thought it was not valuable. Overweight people who think, well, I can't run because I'm too overweight, my knees hurt, but walking is useless, so I'm just going to sit here and gain more weight. I'm giving people who are sedentary permission to start walking immediately. And every step you take in terms of walking will improve your health. Once we stop moving, we start dying.
That is everything. Once we stop moving, we start dying. That is so true. Mark, thank you on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Likewise, Hilda. Good to see you again.
Our guest today was Mark Sisson. Visit his website, paluva.com, to learn about his barefoot shoe line and other resources. And I am Hoda Labrador, the host and producer of this podcast on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for today's episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now this is a simple reminder. Follow this podcast on your favorite podcast app. That way you don't miss a thing. And please share your favorite episodes with friends. Nothing beats word of mouth for helping people discover this podcast. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.